seems like a very quiet evening. Nila is anyways quiet, other than the work we do. That we make a lot of noise while doing that. So I'm just going to introduce Roopa ji. Roopa Mehta. She's the CEO at Sasha, a not-for-profit craft development and marketing organization in India. Sasha provides business opportunity, inputs, and market access for sustainability livelihoods to artisan groups based largely in rural communities and semi-urban areas. In 2019, she was elected as the president of the World Fair Trade Organization, the biggest fair trade organization and network in the world. And that has really done all of us very proud. So I'm going to make this conversation also very interactive. And I think we have a lot to learn from you, and I think 40 minutes isn't enough. But, you know, since we do have you here for 40 minutes, I definitely want to take insight of how, you know, let's start with Sasha. Where did it start? How did it start? You know, what was at that time, what were your thoughts? Because fair trade is a conversation that we'll come into. And even today, many people even don't know what fair trade is. But at that time, when you started Sasha, 40 years now, congratulations, more than 40 years. What were your thoughts and how did it start? I mean, tell us the story of Sasha.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Anuradha. That was my introduction, which was more impressive than I think it needs to be, but anyway. So I think we were a bunch of slightly crazy people, but then it takes crazy people to start something like Sasha. But very qualified. We had designers, we had people who were running businesses, we had social activists, and we had a dream. Now, the 70s, I know most of you won't remember the 70s because you were nowhere around, but the 70s were charmed times. Really, if I think of that, the excitement around crafts and textiles and Pupul Jaikar and the Festival of India and then Bhasin Saab and the Gujari experience, you know, and contemporary arts and crafts, the shop. There was so much movement, but also there was the War of Liberation, Bangladesh. And we were in Calcutta. So you had streams of refugees coming in. And Calcutta is, as a place, you know, it's a city, and around that city there's a lot of poverty. So people do come in, but not the magnitude. So what happened in Bangladesh, when they were rehabilitating Bangladesh, there was a parallel economy. And a part of that resurgence was, you know, securing livelihoods for affected people through their crafts and textiles. So one of the persons who had actually founded the organization, Subhashini Kohli, she was working there. And then when she came into Calcutta, she says that, okay, let's do something for our artisans, for our textile producers, workers. Let's do something which gives them dignity and sustainable livelihoods, which stops migration into the cities. So, and which can allow them to build assets in their own communities instead of leading highly deprived lives. No one heard that, yeah. So I think it was a lot of these factors that came together. At the same time in Europe, there was this movement, alternative trade. Now, alternative trade said that if we are going to address the pressing problems of poverty, of inequities, it would have to be trade, not aid. Because we know the cycle of aid and where it keeps people in the vicious cycle. So these thoughts were happening. And in fact, when Sasha started, we had friends in Europe who were working on, you know, this philosophy, both for farmers and artisans. And they sort of, and we, four groups we started working with, and then it evolved over time. And I think what really sort of happened in Sasha's journey, Anuradha, was that we were very open, and we had wonderful people coming and interacting with us, you know. It was, and I think the team itself, because there was so much energy, There was so much impact, there was so much partnership, there was so much, you're doing something and you're getting something back, you're working on things together. So you were always interacting with the environment. And then Sasha evolved, not only in the business, of course, but what really informed that business from alternative to fair trade.
I mean, if I have to ask numbers, and I know numbers in crafts, I'm not saying they're important, but how many women's lives or how many lives are you affecting when you're, or have done so?
I think it's a very hard question because, in this journey, what very important part of our work is that you empower people because they're making their own societies and their own businesses, and then they should, maybe 5% of their businesses with Sasha or 1%, and then they move on. You have, I think some of you may know Amar Kutir Society and Vishak Textiles, and so I think, but there was a ballpark figure which was thrown at me. Statistics don't mean anything, which I was told that it's a lakh plus in a 40-year journey, and currently it's about 7,000 to 8,000, and growing.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. So talking about fair trade, and I think Sasha is a pioneer in fair trade. Can you talk about actually what is fair trade?
Good question, and there's a textbook definition that all of us in the fair trade movement we arrived at a few years ago when we were framing the fair trade charter. So fair trade is really, at the heart of it, is a trading relationship, okay? And what is it based on? It's based on dialogue. The relationship is a partnership and it's based on dialogue. It's based heavily on transparency and accountability, and it is based on trust. So what does it do basically? It is a sustainable business model. And if I was to really look back and look at where we are today, I think it addresses the most pressing issues around social and economic inequities. And it is an alternative business model. And as people who are interested in this will know that it is now getting its rightful place, because everywhere in the world, people are looking for that social change. Something that should turn the equation. And fair trade is one such model, and it's a sustainable model because it survived for over 50 years. And
you said 50 years, so how did it come about? What was the evolution of fair trade?
I think, typically what I'm told is that there is something called Mennonite Central Committee, and one of the persons who was living in South America, and the wife of the director there, who was living there, and she decided that she is going to create some products in needlecraft of the women in that community, carry them back to their project in the US, to the head office in US, and sell them at the local church. So a lot of this started with an economic relationship, but it was informed by charity in early years. That has changed over time. So it was about Sasha sending a shipment which needed to be there for Christmas, arriving in May the following year, but still getting paid for it. But a lot of that has changed now,
Yeah, so that was my next question. How has that changed?
Yeah,
Where is fair trade today?
Because I think what is obvious, to stand your ground or to have continuity, you have to be sustainable, right? And you can't, and sustainable model means that it is self-sustaining. So what does it mean? At the end of the day, it is about trade. It's about fair trade, which you're talking about fair trade, and there are whole sorts, I can explain that later. So the business model has to be such that everyone in that value chain is being paid or is sustained. So consumers must want your products. It can't only be people with heart. It has to be out there in the market. We were talking about that earlier, right, Sarika? Yeah, so you have to be out there in the market. The products have to sell. And so then the design development became very important. Capacity building, skill upgradation, getting your act together. How are you going to promote the range? How are you going to appeal to a wider audience? So all those things, and it's continuing. I mean, we know that, Anuradha. In the last 2 years, we've been compelled to know more about, selling online, about social media, about making our presence felt. So I think it is important to keep responding and evolving, and at the heart of it, in every business has to be sustainable, and that's where we are.
Yeah, so I definitely feel that as well, and I will get to COVID later, I think, after a couple of my other questions, but you use the word sustainable and you use the word sustainability, which is probably the most used of word in the world, misused and used in the world today. So do you feel, I mean, you obviously do, and I definitely do, but if you can just throw some light on how fair trade, is a sustainable sort of option, or is it a sustainable solution to the global problems that we're facing today?
One of the solutions.
One of the solutions.
Okay, I think fair trade in any case is part of a much larger social movement. And there is a social movement, there are ripples. We talk about sustainable development goals at one level, and who's going to achieve those? It's going to be social organization, it's going to be civil society, it's going to be models like fair trade that are going to achieve all of that. And now, Anuradha, I'm going on another track, so please ask me your question again.
No, I think you should keep going on that track.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with fair trade now, if we look at business, the way we understand business, now the traditional business, the corporations, how would they define success? Is in terms of how much profit they can give their shareholders, how much money they can take to the bank, how much power and influence they have over the market, right? So now it has become, and we all know that, it has become a mindless exploitation of people, a mindless exploitation of natural resources, because that's what makes it tick, right? So that is the objective of the mission, within quotes, of that way of working or doing business. Now, when you look at fair trade, what makes it sustainable? What is it in the value chain? I'll just touch on the principles of fair trade, and then I think if you look at poverty, and all that poverty entails, loss of agency, hunger, deprivation, whatever, and you know that this is a pressing global problem, right? The other is your environment. We have big talks on climate, etc. How do you address that? You can address it only if you don't have too much to lose, right? So when we talk fair trade, we are talking about farmers, we're talking about artisans, we're talking about craftspeople, textile workers, who are primarily using their traditional knowledge, also of the environment, and also with very, very simple techniques and tools. Of course, when we talk techniques and tools, there's also technological intervention, but even that is very thought through. So here is a business model that is using these resources very sparingly. This is a business model that's informed by, the first principle is creating opportunities for the most marginalized, where big businesses are not going, right? So it is looking at people who have the skills, who are able to contribute, who have a way of earning their livelihoods, and creating those opportunities for them. And then there is, of course, the whole thing about good working conditions, following fair trade practices, fair prices, fair wages. Most importantly, long-term relationships. It's not that I'm going to work with you today and then, your prices aren't right, you're not giving me anything, not going to invest in you, I'm going to someone else. So long-term relationships, no discrimination, gender equity, and also respecting indigenous traditional skills. You don't go there and tell people, okay, you have to do this. And the value, I think, when we talk fair trade, we talk about circularity. We talk about circularity, which is not only to do with our material. We're not only to do with the cycling and the upcycling. It's also to do with the social values and how they are shared in the whole cycle. It's also to do with economic value, which is shared through the whole cycle. So something like that is, without doubt, it has to be sustainable, right? Because here is something that is addressing those global issues.
Yeah. So I think all of these things that you've mentioned, my next question was going to be that the World Fair Trade Organization, I wanted to understand how they actually push their agenda, but I think you've sort of answered most of that.
Yeah, no, I can add a couple.
Yeah, I'd like to. And also, if you can also add in terms of, because the World Fair Trade Organization is global, how are those boundaries met, between cultures? Is it similar? Is it different between cultures and spaces and countries?
Well, it's similar because everyone is human. If you get down to it, it's that. But it is, I think the richness is from the diversity. The richness, and we are more similar than we like to see ourselves as. So that is there, and how will we make a difference? I think we are feeling increasingly that it is, of course, a change of mind and heart in a person, then in the family, in society, and then and it carries on. But what is it that we need? I mean, there has to be a paradigm shift, a systemic change in how we see growth, how do we see success? Is it only about power and money? Or is there something else? So that thought process, how are we going to influence that thought process? To see that what we are creating is based on equity. It's based on sustainability. It's based on care. It's based on humanness. At the heart of it are people and planet, and they are the most important. So I think these are the things, and how would WFTO, I think what we feel increasingly to be a larger influence, we have to, of course, have to collaborate much more with the larger fair trade community, with other social organizations, other networks, civil society, consumers. I think consumers are a big power. How do you create that shift? I think Fashion Revolution did that. I mean, some of the big brands did some greenwashing and social washing because they can't get away from it. And that's the way I think we would push the envelope a little.
So 2019 is when you got elected as the president of the World Fair Trade Organization. How was that? I mean, I don't know, was that a feeling? Was that an achievement? Of course, I think it was both, but... And then also, after you've taken over as president, what is your sort of contribution towards pushing their agenda, as well as your, your mission or your vision?
Yeah, first of all, I think it was a natural evolution. I'd already served on the board of WFTO for 8 years. And I must say that while I'm the president, every member on the board brings tremendous value to the board. And everyone...
They're global. They're from all over the world.
They're from all over. They have to be representatives from every region. So from Latin America, Pacific, Africa, Asia, Europe. So representatives from each of those continents. And there are 3 independent directors and a president. So I think it is supporting the team and understanding that, and we also, the board barely came in and then we had the COVID situation. But I think it's a lot of continuation. It isn't that you changed course, but yes, given the current environment, given what was happening, like with COVID, we obviously had to be more present in our social media. We had to arrange very many more webinars, and so again, I've said this earlier about Sasha, and I think with WFTO, there is a certain agility and nimbleness because of the nature of work we do. You have to respond both to the environment and the need of our producers in Sasha's case and to the members in WFTO's case, yeah.
So going back to COVID, I think the textile and crafts industry was deeply, deeply affected. Even though there wasn't much talk of it, but at least in the small community that we exist in, we realized and understood how the craftspeople were affected. At that time, I mean, you did say right already that the WFTO did hold webinars, and we were going online, and we at Nila did the same. We had a shop here, and we had some exhibitions going on, and we immediately went online. But other than that, number one, what do you feel was the number one problem that these artisans and craftspeople faced? I
think at that time, first off, I think just because you're fair trade, there is a WFTO community came together. There was a particular group, which was the WFTO community, and which was sharing a lot about what was going on and how they were coping, etc. And I think that was important to create a sense of solidarity. So yes, there was a lot of apprehension, uncertainty for a while, because it just came on so strong. But what really happened in this community was that nobody cancelled orders. Nobody cancelled orders. Nobody stopped shipments. Shipments may not go because of other reasons, but the doors were open, the exchange, and that's what this fair trade is defined by, that sense of partnership. And every organization, like at Sasha, we did whatever we could, because there was a question of relief as well, because in Bengal we had a cyclone. So there's a question of relief, and there was a question of what kind of medical attention can be made available to people. So many of the buyers, they had crowdfunding initiatives, and funds were flowing in to give that support to people. So the relief part was immediate, and the rehabilitation was, of course, capacity building, and then the buyers fortunately had an online presence, so they did very well. Then in the country, I mean, many of the fair trade organizations, they were themselves also working on how to create avenues for selling. Like, I know at Sasha, what we did was on WhatsApp, we would take photographs and we were sending it off. And then getting in touch with other online stores like GoCop and others who were very willing to take stocks. But internationally, I think what helped people a lot, and it was for a short while, the recovery was also very quick. And I think there was a phenomena at that time. Maybe because people had more time, social media was more active, and people did reflect, and you've seen that trend.
Yeah, and that's the change which has come about.
And that's a change, and I think what is a big challenge for us, or an opportunity, is to keep going, to say this is now, shift. Because every purchase, every thought, every contribution, every time even an emotional connect with this philosophy, it will change something on how we behave, if I may use that term.
Yeah.
So I think this has been, and some countries did really well, like New Zealand. They said, people banned China because they were so upset. But, I think about the country. I also think about ordinary citizens in China and how they get affected because they moved more to fair trade. They moved more to thoughtful purchases. So, and that's something we should continue with.
Yeah, absolutely. We faced this here with a lot of communities we were working with. And I have some of my colleagues here who work in the community. Resources were not available. So yeah, absolutely, there wasn't a cancellation of orders and there wasn't a cancellation of shipments, but there were artisans and communities who were stuck without resources. And that is also because the resources were coming from, across the country or across the state. And at least that is something that we've reflected upon here at Nila, and we work on that very specifically, where we're trying to build hyper-local communities. And that, again, literally saying small cottage industries like there used to be in the 70s, in the romantic 70s. But, we need to go back to that. I feel that way. I don't know.
So. I agree
and
with
that's
you.
Sustainability.
Yeah, because in Calcutta, we got people to open up shops quietly at the back. And somebody with that permission, you could wear those cards, identity, whatever you call them, and we would get them to go around, or somebody from one district, but who was allowed to have a car, would pick up stuff from others and bring them in. And there was one courier that was functioning. And then as it started opening up, it's just that, again, it comes to how agile you are. So, and that is because it's light. To take a quick decision and you create something. But I agree with you that, that dependency factor, and if you can, and then even environmentally, though of course we export so much of our stuff, but even environmentally to control that, whatever is produced, as practical as is possible is important, What I didn't tell you during COVID times again was that there were, I think many of the communities, at least in Asia, were making masks, and this was initiated by one or two folks. And these masks were to provide income to the makers and for distribution to their communities.
Yeah, and that's what we did here as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was such an easy way of doing it, because it was so needed, and it was needed by the community. So, initiatives of this nature, I think you're willing to take, and that will to do something, to improvise, comes from being of a particular mindset. And I like to use the word heart also. Your heart has to be in the right place.
Absolutely. I'm just going to point out here that, during COVID, there were many artisans who actually didn't have work, at least around Rajasthan. And that's when we started this project, the Corona Quilt project, where we felt it was really important for at least the people we were involved in. And there are artisans as well as students who, were sitting at home and doing online classes, etc. And, we wanted to bring the community together. Of course, the significance of a quilt is warmth and safety and strength. So to bring them together, and actually we gave each artisan, each student, or there's some here that we've made here as well. We gave them each one panel, and we said, it's your panel, create something, and it's not a product. Because usually when you go to an artisan, it's about making something and selling something. It's a product. Of course it's important, it's a way of life and it's their livelihood, but the expression, the creativity is never spoken about. My father always used to say that artisan ke haath mein bhagwan hota hai. And I've grown up hearing this. So this project, especially the Corona Quilt project, was so special to us because we went to the artisan and we explained to them that this is a piece of art. This is an artwork that you are going to be contributing to, and that artwork is going to be stitched together as a quilt, but not something to sell, but to showcase as your creativity. I just wanted to put that in.
No, I think that is so important because that makes me think about our whole Kantha project, Anuradha, because so much of it was based on, again, your father coming to an exhibition in Delhi, which was done with Dastakar. And that was again the 80s, actually, 84, I think. And we had, we had got, the women were doing on very trendy. And Kantha wasn't quite the thing at that time. And then Bhasin Saab came up and said to us that, what are you guys doing? I mean, you have such wonderful embroidery skills, which are typical of your area and which is your identity. And we started the whole project, and this is just what it was, just the humanness and just the emotion behind creating that kantha. And we've had many moments like that, There was once this store which is based in Paris and Japan, Habitat, I think, yeah. Oh no, this was the Conran store. Yeah. And they just said, you give this to women, exactly what you've done. And we need this size, and you get the women to do something on Calcutta. And they just did. And I think that is what, if you ask me, what keeps me going, it's being here in Nila House, right. And so on.
I read somewhere about the World Shop movement. I have no idea what it is.
Well, it just went parallel to alternative and fair trade growing, and this was started again almost simultaneously, in the late 70s and 80s, because you needed places to sell. But because these were, low cost products, so this, the money the funds which were available were very little. So, you had little spaces donated or whatever, or in people's homes and things that you had a place, and volunteers would run world shops. And it still has that culture of volunteers, so there is one organization or two fair trade organizations or three in a country, and there might be 30 world shops or 100 world shops, like in Germany. There may be 4 big organizations, and they also supply to the world shops. But even this has evolved. Instead of just looking like little stores, now the whole merchandising visual and all that is growing. But I think this is very important. It's very important. Sometimes we do have our members saying, oh, the world shops, they could do much better, and maybe you need professional people. But I think that's an aside. It's been a big asset, yeah.
And are there online world shops?
No.
Just asking.
No.
Because everything's online today.
No, maybe there are a few that have gone online now, especially during the COVID period. But yeah, I think you're right, actually, Anuradha, that I did hear about a couple of world shops which went online because they were also doing some crowdfunding, and they were doing crowdfunding. Yeah, so. But it isn't, I don't think it's become quite the norm. But,
businesses that aren't, who haven't been practicing in this model, who've been more aggressive, who've been more larger, do you think there is possibility of conversion? Because there are many people thinking about, going local. There are many people who are talking about sustainability. So I think that conversion is going, I feel that it's happening. I feel people are consolidating. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think so. I think people who reach out to us are small businesses or bigger businesses as well, fashion brands, who want to buy from fair trade organizations. They want to support fair trade organizations. Their demands are high, but which is always a good thing, because then you are expected to scale up. Yes. Whether it's your capability, your skill, etc. Whether you need new tools, so it's always an opportunity. But I do think that big brands and even big companies, as part of their social chapter in their business, they are looking at it. But I think because the success of fair trade business models, and if this thought around new economy, that, can we create another kind of business model which which is not designed to collapse, then that probably will. But the change is there, definitely the change is there. Yeah.
And how can consumers join the movement, according to you? How?
The biggest resource, just buy
Just
thoughtfully. Just buy thoughtfully. And I always say that, we all buy too much. You don't have to buy too much. You buy that one thing which you treasure. Like, I still have my mother's saris, and I love wearing them. And, we have a tradition of that. You don't have to go through 6 seasons of, like fashion brands have, or home fashion brands have. They started with 2 to 4 to 6, I believe now. So, but just buy thoughtfully. And I think what becomes important is to see what is my purchase, what is the impact it's going to make, right? I suppose all of us would like to have a hamburger once in a while, but don't make it your staple diet, So that is what I would say, yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think value everything that you buy, and then it's not going to just be a product anymore. It's going to be part of your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I say this after splurging all my life, but
but I'm sure on the most beautiful things.
Yeah, so. I think. But I think we also grew with that culture. No, we didn't throw away things.
No, not at all.
You didn't throw away things. No.
Yeah.
Even now I get hand-me-downs from my sisters and my daughters. I keep my cupboard door open for all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't you think? Yeah,
and a sari, and I have got coats made from my mother's saris, which have torn, so I've worn them until they've torn. And now that they're torn, I make a coat out of it, because again, it's quilted so that you get the strength again. So you make a coat. First you make a shirt, then you make a coat. So it just goes on and on and on. So I think the word sustainability has been in our blood since, since generations.
Yeah, it is there. You wash thoughtfully, you iron, you
absolutely.
keep, and you give.
Absolutely. Well, these are really all of my questions. I thank you so much. I don't know if you'd like to leave a message. We're online as well, so if you'd like to leave a message to the audience, and then I'm going to open the floor for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anuradha. I mean, it's always good to get an opportunity to share. Yeah. And what is my message? My message, I think my whole talk was a message, but I would like to say that we need to just find time to think a little more about what we buy, how we do our businesses, and the impact which our actions have. I think just a little more. It's not a life lesson, but I think it's just being a bit more thoughtful and knowing that that every action of yours, particularly every purchase of yours, does make a difference. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yeah. Ma'am, like we discussed that, that fair trade has scope of, catering to many issues we have in India specifically that are related to poverty and employment. Do you feel that it has the scope of, catering to issues as complex as Ukraine and Russia, where Ukrainians are looking for jobs? So do you feel that fair trade has the scope of catering to that some way, going international maybe?
What do I say to that? I think it's again comes back to this mindless need for power and wealth or control. How do you change that? So it just has to be some sort of, I don't think that's within the scope of fair trade. But it is, for instance, if Ukraine is back to normal, the situation improves, because fair trade is also in the so-called Eastern Bloc. There are many countries that are now also promoting fair trade, and they have fair trade business. But a war is at least I can't think of it, Anuradha, unless there is, there has to be a paradigm shift in how the world is run. One way maybe, like there are many women who are agents of change in fair trade, many women leaders. Maybe we just need more women leaders. Yeah, that might solve the problem, yeah.
So, you just spoke about this mindless need for power. So again, translating it into business, because the market is just that much. Thank God it's expanding. So, how do you, for fair trade, for produce that is made through fair trade, for products with a heart, how do you increase your market? Because pockets and budgets are just that much in the face of larger corporations who have all kinds of power, including, thought control over consumers' monies.
First of all, I think a lot of the money goes in the branding and the promotion. So the cost cutting and keeping people in misery and poverty is, the more you can do that, the more money you'll have. Now I'm being a little cynical, don't want to be that, but I think it's only through information, and I think it's through dialogue, it's for being more present, for offering good alternatives, of making people more aware that you have the power for change. So I don't think it'll come out of competing with those big brands. It comes out of trying to create a shift in the minds. And then it's like I said, fair trade is a part of a much larger social movement. And it is to do with a change of heart and mind. So that's the way, I don't think a Sasha can challenge H&M or Zara. In fact, we wouldn't mind if they also would buy from some fair trade producers. So that is the thing. But I think in India it should not be so difficult, in fact, because we are still closer to the culture and things, so to talk about it a bit more, but yeah. And there's a Fair Trade Forum India, but still in India, people don't really know about fair trade. Which are the fair trade products, etc. Enough. But there's time for change, yeah.
There is an online question. Is it possible to support directly, please, in terms of products?
Is it possible
to support directly?
To the artisans?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course. It's always a choice. Of course it is, yeah.
I have one more question, which actually I wanted to ask you, somewhere in the middle, because of a conversation you had. You were talking about how my father, Mr. Bhasin, actually came to you and said, why are you doing Gujarati embroidery? Many times through my career, of 20 years, where I've been in and out of craft and design and arts, I've seen a lot of people working in Rajasthan, a lot of people working in Gujarat, and there's this, everybody's done it, and it's of course been there, done it, but there's a lot of talk about Gujarat and Rajasthan and Gujarat and Rajasthan, and the other pockets of India sort of get left behind somewhere. Do you also feel that way? It's coming up now, there are a lot of conversations happening now, but do you feel they're not in the forefront like Gujarat especially has been, or Rajasthan, and do you think this was because of the 70s where Pupul Jaikar and all of them sort of had that?
I think, in fact, what they did was they also had that Vishwakarma, which showed textiles from all over. It's so beautiful, they did. So I think that was also there. And now, of course, like for West Bengal, there's so much that we talk about. Northeast and in the south as well, from now textiles, etc. People are getting more aware. Yeah, but at that time, at that time it was Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was Gujari, there was Contemporary Arts and Crafts, there was the shop, and just a few things. And of course, cottage industries, which was always there. But, and cottage industries also had crafts from all over, but not the resurgence the way it was with everywhere. Yeah. But so grateful to your father for that, because he did such good work with Kantha, yes. He's an amazing man. He's an amazing man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, one more question.
Oh, well, you try getting in touch with us at Sasha. Just Google us, Sasha World, and you can choose the way you want to work with them, directly or through Sasha or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
I have another question, just adding to what Anu said. So again, there's a lot of conversation and, possibly more importance in craft given to textile, so to say, and very little, relatively little spoken about, the sort of 3D craft when we have so much of it in India. So, and across
We don't even have a ministry
programs.
for handicraft.
I know.
It's
I mean,
handloom.
and it's sometimes when you say craft, they just equate it to acha, tie and dye, band. I mean, Gujarat, Rajasthan, textiles comes first. Baki, everything is sort of forgotten. So how do we change that? Because, and this is something that the artisans themselves have felt. One of them actually told me कि दीदी वो कुछ second class होता है ना citizen.
That's how they feel.
Yeah, because I think people buy more textiles, for one, much more textiles and crafts. And crafts is really more for the home. And, and so now, in fact, I think in the past few years, people are focusing more on home. But of course, there are home textiles as well. And probably, the textile tradition is so rich in our country. Every state, every technique, there's so many. Of course, with crafts too, I was at Jaipur Modern, and I saw the two most beautiful bidri pieces. They were exquisite. But yeah, so that's a question. I wonder how much attention is being paid to this, to crafts and textiles also. I think there are a lot of individual initiatives, and they're growing. And I think there's a move for handmade now. So even for crafts, if you obviously, you have to work to make, to look at utility and give the kind of products which are needed. But yeah, contemporary arts and crafts started a long time ago, and they did great work with it, right? So the opportunity is there. So Nila House can do some crafts also, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
All indigo, yeah, like those mudas, yeah.
Yeah, so that's, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I actually, there's a question that Anuradha asked, just continuing with that. So we're saying a lot of brands are kind of associating with a lot of crafts. Crafts, it's a labor of love, it takes a lot of time to do. So do you think that a lot of bigger brands coming into the picture is necessarily a good thing, because that might dilute the sort of commercialization, and a lot of mass production might kind of dilute their sense of it?
I wonder if there can be mass production. It's just the nature of the crafts. And I think it was Kamala Devi who said, at least we should take the tedium out of crafts. So, the tools, etc., improve so that more production can be done, and you organize your production better. There's some technological intervention, you get better machines again and tools. So you organize your production better, but it can't. It can't be nuts and bolts. And at the end of the day, I think, of course, tradition is important, and for us who are working in this area, and that's why organizations like Nila and Sasha and so many others in this Dastakar in this country, it's important is that it is about livelihoods. But it's about livelihoods, but not at a cost.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
at a cost.
And I was
yeah.
going to add to that as well, to say that I think it's important to remain, to hold value. And I think what actually dilutes is actually mass producing something at a lower quality. That's what dilutes it. That's what dilutes craft. That's what dilutes tradition. That's what dilutes the skill. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to languish the actual craft communities, because it's going to turn into something completely different. So what is really important, which, is to hold the value, to talk to people about it, make other people feel the value of it. And that's how it's going to remain to be not only, alive, but also, move forward.
Yeah, I think it's a question of finding balance, santulan.
Absolutely.
You just see what is. And our craft communities were serving a need. There was creativity in it, but the relevance came from serving a need, right? It wasn't, we put things in museums. They become enriching. It's a source. You can take from there. You can sort of find the drive to do something more, but it is about meeting needs. It's an economic need, yeah? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Rupa
Anuradha,
ji.
for inviting
Thank you so
me.
much.
It
This
was such a
has been
pleasure.
really beautiful and very insightful. And thank you to
Thank you.
all of you for being here, and keep coming back.
Yes.
Yeah, and keep
There's
supporting.
an exhibition, no?
There's an exhibition upstairs. I think some of you haven't been because you came in. There's an exhibition going on till the 15th upstairs of craftspeople. They're here from 5 different states. There's 6 groups here, so do go, and Sasha is one of them. Do go and visit that. There are demonstrations which happen every day, also until the 15th, from 11 to 1, and from 3 to 5? No, 11 to 1. But, the artisans are upstairs, so, they're always happy to show you what they're doing. And then we have a beautiful exhibition downstairs of antique textiles, precious textiles from Subhash Sharmaji's private collection. He has a small shop right in front of City Palace, but has been collecting textiles for the past 40 years, the most beautiful old precious textiles. And so he has actually lent us a collection, a very small collection of quilted textiles and products, but all using quilting techniques. And that's downstairs, and that's going to be on until the end of April. The Corona Quilt project is also up, where we've engaged with artisans from Rajasthan, and this is going to be up till July. Please do follow us, and we'll be coming back with lots more. Yeah, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.